Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and entrepreneurship to help you harness your own inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today is Avery Akkineni, who is the president of not Vayner NFT, recently rebranded Vayner 3, and she leads Vayner's mission to build long-term strategic NFT projects for the world's leading intellectual property owners. Collaborators include brands, celebrities, athletes, and associations that are looking to incentivize and reward brand advocacy and customer loyalty. And prior to Vayner, Avery launched Vayner Media's Asia Pacific arm, growing the team from 0 to 150 in just 2 years. And in her time there, she opened offices in Singapore, Bangkok, Tokyo, and Sydney, to name a few pretty awesome spots. And before Vayner, she worked at a couple of little companies called Google and Target, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And Avery's in a unique position, to say the least, and is creating what will likely become the blueprint for NFT brands and agencies moving forward. So let's get right to it and pick her brain on what she's been up to. Avery, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And we were chatting beforehand, and I've had so much of the Vayner crew, a group of folks that have meant so much to me. And, you know, even though my time there was short, I find that the relationships that I built over the last 7-8 years since have just been really what it's all about. So I thank you first and foremost for making the time, being so generous with your knowledge, not just to me, but everyone out there. So quick thank you.
Thank you so much. And that means a lot.
Cool. And I appreciate you for joining me here. So let's hit the big old rewind button here, as I like to do on the podcast, and take it back. So originally from Nashville, right before it was the Nash Vegas that we know it today, a little bit different. And you've had a pretty interesting journey, you know, from University of San Diego through Target and working there. What was like that, you know, take it back to those early stages, like, you know, in college, did you have any clue or any thought of what you wanted to be, and even imagining where you would be now?
Not a clue. I think, so I went to college in San Diego, which I thought was the best place ever. And I still think San Diego is the best place ever. I really adored it. Had amazing friends, great connection and community there. I originally wanted to go into being a business executive at a brand. So I started at Target, and they have a very specific management training program of how they groom their executives. And they basically give you a handbook when you have your first day there. They take you to Minneapolis. Everybody's wearing red and khaki. It's like, this is how you become an executive at Target. Follow these 485 steps. If you do them right in this order, then you will succeed here. And it was a really great first job, because they have all of this sort of like history and data of how executives succeed at Target, in a very specific process in which they sort of groom their talent and develop people over time. So it was a great first job. I learned a lot about a lot of different things at Target. I loved San Diego, but I realized that I wanted a little bit more freedom and flexibility in my role. It's very specific, and also includes working on Thanksgivings and Black Fridays, which I was, even the executives, which I was not all about.
Gotta suck it up.
So I realized that maybe retail was not going to be my future. And the sort of red and khaki is almost like symbolic of how they're really uniform and they're really fair. And it's really an amazing company, but it's all very standardized, even down to what people wear. Like if you walk around headquarters, like you'll see the CEO wearing red and khaki. And I realized I wanted to stand out a little bit more. And do something that was a little bit more unique. And I got an amazing job opportunity at Google in San Francisco. And I figured, I think Google's a rocket ship. I was a power user of the products. This was 2012, so Google was nowhere near as large and omnipresent as it is today. Crazy to
think back to 2012, 10 years ago. But let's pause there for a moment. And one of the things that I love to talk about are those early experiences, because I know in my career, most people talk about, the good, but we also should talk about the not so good. And one of the core things about those early jobs, whether it be internships or those first ones, is learning what you don't like. And from the sound of it, it sounds like structure or such formality and confirmation. Is that really what it was all about? I mean, what was that key takeaway of what you didn't like working at Target?
Yeah, it's a super structured environment. So I think it was a little too much structure for me personally, though I still, funny enough, have friends who were in my start class at Target who are still there and who really
Lifers.
love the company. They're lifers. They have a lot of lifers there. And
Oh,
they
yeah.
do a great job of retention and developing their talent, which is something that I really admire out of Target. But for me, it was too much structure. And also the nature of work in retail is just not necessarily for me in terms of like the hours. And so much of it's super manual and super labor intensive. That I think that was one of the things that actually drew me to Google was this automation and scale and speed that exists in technology that just inherently can't exist in a retail business.
Interesting. Yeah. So talk about your time at Google, which is fascinating. I love to talk to Googlers about, and especially at the time you were there. So 2012, and Google being on the front lines of all things, future forward and trends. What was one of those important lessons or philosophies that you kind of saw coming before everybody else? Because that's kind of what's happening in Web3 right now. I mean, you're in the people throw around the term alpha, but I would say that you're super alpha. So what was some of that super alpha at Google that you picked up on before it was, commonplace?
I think e-commerce, Google was really fundamental in unlocking e-commerce for a lot of large companies. And I remember conversations in 2012 where, brands and like at Google, you would consider that a B2B play. B2B type of companies were like, oh, nobody's ever going to, buy a mattress online, buy a car online. And then you started to see the early adopters who started to do it. And now, of course, 10 years later, it's everywhere. People buy everything online, whether they're buying a sparkling water online or they're buying their phone online or they're buying an engagement ring online. People buy everything online now. And I think Google was fundamental in helping drive that for a new generation of entrepreneurs who also launched D2C brands that could out innovate and move faster than a lot of the more sort of established retail competitors.
And that's a fantastic take too. I mean, are you seeing some similarities from your time at Google and that crystal ball that you had in front of you, kind of the way Web3 is right now?
100%. I think there are so many parallels of what Google unlocked as a platform, and also gave rise to this whole new generation of other platforms, whether that's Meta or that's Amazon or that's eBay or that's Snap or Twitter. It opened up a whole new slew of tools for brands to communicate with their consumers for things like commerce, communication, entertainment, and of course, YouTube. I also think was a crystal ball
100%.
for just how TV can be digital. Like TV did not used to be digital. It used to be you had to tune in at like 8 p.m. to watch your favorite show on Thursday. Now you can watch it whenever you want on your iPhone or your Android. Got to be fair to Google there.
Side note, did you see in today's, like, I'm sure you get a million daily emails like I do, but Netflix is going through some struggles with their subscription that they're considering ads.
I saw that.
What's your hot take on that?
I think Netflix having an ad-fueled ecosystem is a natural fit for them. I think there's a certain number of people who prefer to subscribe and they don't want ads and they'd rather pay. But you also see from places like YouTube with billions of users, there's a lot of people who just want to watch it and they don't mind if they have to watch an ad.
Yeah, Hulu too.
If they don't have to pay $10, they're more than happy, or whatever it is, $12 these days for Netflix. I think that will open up a whole new slew of people who tune into the Netflix shows.
So you don't think they're going to be sacrificing some of their core brand story? Like, this is who we are. We are the, high quality content, no commercials. This is who we are. Like, or some loyal subscribers going to be like, no, they can charge me more money. I'm not interested.
Well, Netflix has kind of been gradually increasing costs for the last several years as they've kind of tapped out their subscription growth. And I think particularly in emerging markets, people might not have $12 a month to spend on this. And if they want to unlock market share in places like India and Southeast Asia, I think it's going to be pretty critical to their business. Of course, I do believe they should continue their like OG heritage of premium content. Model. Yeah. So I think having both streams in parallel is probably the right move for Netflix.
I was actually going to save this for later, but it kind of got my brain spinning here. So I had the pleasure to interview Kevin Smith, who was a speaker at VeeCon a couple of weeks back. It actually worked out pretty well because I got bumped from his interview at VeeCon, where I probably would have had maybe like 6 to 10 minutes with him. And he spent 32 minutes with me,
Nice.
which was incredible. And he launched a couple of weeks back one of the first core movies to be released via NFT Kilroy, via NFTs. 5,555 versions of that. And he equated it to like, this is the movement of indie films, back 20 years back. From your perspective and your approach, looking at entertainment, is releasing content through NFTs going to really be the way of the future?
Potentially. I think that there's a ton of promise in using NFTs as a fundraising vehicle for things like indie films. If you look at shows like Stoner Cats that have launched with an NFT first, you can obviously make a lot of money, especially if you time it correctly, and you can use that to fund the development of the show, which is amazing. But I think that the timing of the market and the pricing needs to be readjusted, and expectations need to be a little bit realigned. So reality is very few people today even know what an NFT is, much less are holding an NFT, much less are going to invest in indie film NFT. If you have an amazing IP that can break through, absolutely, and it's a fundamental new model that empowers holders of the NFT and creators to have aligned incentives, which is tremendously powerful. I think it's very hard to do that successfully these days. We see incredibly successful entrepreneurs and builders launching NFT programs and selling just a couple hundred of them. So it's important that you have the realistic expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we talk about, the big hurdle right now in the Web3 and NFT world is education and adoption. And I think that when there's more mainstream projects coming out, there'll be more eyeballs on it. And a lot of the folks, we also know right now we're still at the early adopter phase, in my opinion, and we're starting to see a lot more mainstream acceptance and trial. I mean, it doesn't really help when you see a lot of the negative news that are out there, whether it be the scams, whether you see the rug pulls and everything. But what do you think like the big kind of block, the big hurdle into adoption and education is right now?
I think the consumer journey is like long and painful. It's like, we're just talking about Google in 2012, like buying a mattress online didn't used to be easy. It wasn't 3 clicks. It was like 30 clicks, and you had to input a bunch of stuff, and it wasn't fast or transparent. And, it wasn't a great process, right? So the early adopters did it anyway, because they're like, hey, I'm going to do this. But if you were a person buying a mattress online in 2012, you were an early adopter. That's where we are right now with if you're a person buying an NFT. In 2022, you're an early adopter because it's a kind of an annoying process to have ETH, like make sure that you put in your MetaMask account, buy it, then you have to move it to your cold wallet so it doesn't get stolen, but make sure you don't sign a transaction for an app that has been compromised. Don't click on the wrong link in Discord. There's a lot of like do's and don'ts right now that are it's a lot of complication for your average user. What I think will happen is 3 things. One, there's education, and like education is fundamental. Is like, why does digital asset ownership matter? The second thing is on-ramps, easier on-ramps, more seamless. Amazon revolutionized e-commerce with the one click. So that same idea of just one click, keep it simple. Like the simpler, the better. And the third part is I think we also need things that people want to buy. Things that people want to collect, that they want to buy, that they view as valuable, and something that like means something to them. There's a lot of NFTs out there that are interesting to the creator, but I get pitched NFT projects all the time. And like, but who cares about that? And really having things that break through to mainstream consumers in terms of whether they look cool, they sound cool, they make you look cool in the metaverse, beyond the financial speculation aspect, we need programs and NFT brands to launch things that people actually want.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit deeper as the word utility. And I think utility is subjective, right? Because a one-of-one piece of digital art, its subjective utility and value is to the user. They're a collector for it. They value the piece of art. It means a lot to them. Versus utility, let's just say, because we're in this universe of a Vayner sports pass, the utility of being a sports fan and having access to certain things. Utility is subjective. I mean, how do you work with brands to really define what that utility is and ensuring that there's a demand for that and calculating the value and how it relates to an NFT project?
So
that's like a 10-part question.
Utility can mean a lot of different things. It can mean access to a talent, like you get access to Gary Vee if you have a brunch bear. It can mean utility in terms of being part of a club. It means you can get access to special Discord channels, like the Punks Discord chat is like the most coveted one to get in. You have to have a punk to be able to talk. Otherwise, you just read it. Or it can mean things like you get access to merchandise and product, or it can mean you got access to discounts. I think that like utility element, again, comes back to understanding your consumer. What does your consumer want from you that you can then provide to them via an NFT? And maybe it's access to you as a celebrity. Maybe it's meet and greets. Maybe it's merch. Maybe it's early access to some of your products. If you're a hot brand, like a hot streetwear brand that your drops always sell out, people might, pay to be a part of a club that's able to get early access. Or things like product, right? Like a lot of brands create physical products, sending either, limited editions or special products to your loyalist fans, I think is really interesting. So I think that utility has to be unique to something that fans actually want. So just today, we actually did launched a project with and Gatorade. So Gatorade, they do a really cool program called Athlete of the Year, Player of the Year, where they highlight 12 different emerging athletes and, typically give them some swag. We actually also added an NFT component this year where you rip open a pack of 3 and it's only $5 and all proceeds go to benefit their charity partner. And I think that makes sense for Gatorade because they have this program. The utility is collecting, like, it's like a rookie card for these emerging athletes, and previous players of the year have been like Peyton Manning and all these super famous people. So you're getting an early rookie card from Gatorade.
It ties to their brand, always represent or showcasing, the top athletes. Exactly.
And also it goes to Good Sports Charity, which is another like utility for people. I think that's a really smart way for brands, to do something that you don't have to commit a ton of utility, but hey, it's $5 going to a charity and you get this cool card. You get 3 of these cool cards. And I think that's a nice example of something that has the right expectations. On the flip side, if you're charging an ETH for something, you're charging 2 ETH for something, you're expecting more utility. Like, let's just take VeeCon as an example. The mint price for those was like on average just over an ETH, but you're getting access to a 4-day conference 3 years in a row with incredible
there's a ton
speakers.
Of utility there. Yeah.
It depends how you price it and how you deliver upon that value.
I mean, it's a Wild West, and as you know, being firsthand at the front line of it, it's just a fascinating place to be in from all different perspectives. For me, doing talent. So let's talk about talent for a moment there before I go back to the rewind button. What is the biggest challenge, whether it be at Vayner 3 or what you're hearing from your clients in the space as they build teams, as they look to expand their teams, to grow, to hire? What do you see as the biggest challenges in hiring for Web3?
Combining people who understand what's happening in Web3 from a practitioner level and marrying that with people who understand business. I think a lot of, when we're hiring for Vayner 3, you need to have at least one, and you have ideally both. And I think the strongest people on our team have both business acumen and a real understanding of Web3. I think that's a super important combination that's very rare. It's like finding a unicorn. You can't
because there's no real people. Experts, right? Like, I would say, I would consider you an expert. There's very few experts because of how long we've been in this space. But, when we look in Web3, when I hire for my clients, it's being like at least at a strong enthusiast level, but having that business acumen, because the number one complaint I hear is, hey, we found a developer, but they have zero communication skills. They have that business acumen, which is missing.
Yeah, it's funny though. So I've spent a lot of time like recruiting for, obviously, hiring my team. We've had like over 60 people join, which is amazing. And I actually do a lot of my recruiting from Twitter. Used to be like LinkedIn and Greenhouse, but and Twitter has been my top place where you can hear how people talk, how they articulate their ideas, what they post. So I'll give like my head of strategy, my Web3 ops director, and my chief of staff. I met all of them on Twitter because I can see what they post, what they think, how they engage, and then combine that with like, okay, great, verify they've actually worked at some real companies, and that they also want to work at a more sort of traditional business. Like, we work 9 to 5, we have meetings, there's Zoom calls. It's like a real job.
And
not everybody who's in the Web3 world wants to do that full time.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And that's what I love about Web3, because it's forced me, recruiting in Web3, because it's forced me to look outside and say, okay, well, the folks we're looking for are not necessarily on LinkedIn like they used to be. They're not sitting in my email database. And one of the really cool things that we work with one of our clients is we empowered their Discord community to crowdsource designers that we were looking for.
I love that.
Because they were aficionados, and we help facilitate that. So that's one of the really cool kind of interesting things that we do there. The podcast is brought to you in partnership with Venturi, the recruitment operating system. the all-in-one tech platform purposely built for recruitment and staffing to unify your front, middle, and back office operations. Vincere is designed by recruiters for recruiters. Both the company and the platform are the unique creations of successful recruiters who sold their business, saw a need for a better recruitment tech, and made it happen. And if you're looking to upgrade your recruitment tech and give your recruiters a new modern operating system, visit vincere.io/podcast. That's vincere.io/POZCAST for an exclusive offer. Thanks. But let's hit the rewind button, and I'd love to dig into that story because it's very serendipitous, right? Like, so you correct me if I'm wrong here. The way the story goes, Gary was speaking, or he had something going on at Google, and you guys met, and yada yada yada. Vayner 3, right? Like, so, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that story, and then the second part is being in the last 3 years. Can't believe I'm saying almost 3 years of the pandemic, with so much of a shift from work from home. Right now, if you were work from home at Google, you probably wouldn't have met Gary, and the serendipitous moment probably wouldn't have happened.
That's true. It's very true. I think in person really matters. I'll tell you a little bit about the story of how I first encountered Gary. So I first started with meeting. So I was working at Google across a bunch of platforms. I worked across search, across YouTube, and across DoubleClick, which was a Google acquisition. Mm-hmm. That's basically a programmatic platform. And Gary came in to do a talk for us, like one of his inspiration talks. And I was just very impressed with how he thought about things in his own category. There was like other agencies were sort of like shades of gray. Then there was Gary Vee, who was like he was like orange. It just like, it wasn't like the others at all. And that was at least very interesting. And I also got to know Jeff Nicholson, who at the time was our chief media officer. And he started hitting me up, and, we started becoming friendly, and he was telling me about what they were building. And I thought, okay, great, I'm going to jump on board. I started on the Vayner media side. I worked on the media side for about a year and a half before going to launch our offices in Asia Pacific, which started with Singapore and expanded into Bangkok and Sydney and Tokyo and Hong Kong and others. And then that had gone really well. And I think because of how quickly I was able to stand up Vayner in APAC in a market where Gary's awareness is not as high as it is in the United States, Gary thought I was like ready for this next challenge, and he wanted to really put our best foot forward with this NFT work and the company that we're going to build. Gary tweeted something like right before we launched it that said Vayner NFT, it's going to be the biggest Vayner of them all. And I do believe that Web3 is the future of our company.
Absolutely.
We see a huge, Adam, you've been part of the Vayner family. We've had a huge halo that has benefited the core business of VaynerMedia because of what we've been able to do in the NFT side of things. And I think it's really created some differentiation for our core business. With that said, we have been fully remote, or not fully remote. We've been at least partially remote since March of 2020. 2020, yeah. Since March of 2020.
It's been so long. We actually have to fact check the year. I mean, it's been ages.
It's been ages, and that was really challenging at first, but I think we have developed a rhythm. Vayner is definitely an in-person kind of, an in-person kind of a company where, whether it's like playing beer pong in the office or like evening hangs or, working on a deck at
the social
like
element
late
to
night,
it.
The social element that really, is the reason we have so many Vayner couples, people who met in the office. So that I think is the biggest detriment to like sort of what we've lost. But with that, I think our people have gained a lot of flexibility, which gives them more time for work-life balance. And we've tried to be very intentional around curating some great stuff in person when we can. So we actually just had a team offsite where we flew in everybody for Vayner 3, hung out in person, took over an area of Hudson Yards, got to know each other on a personal level. And I think those things really matter and are really valuable.
They do matter. And so, so if you go back, let's just say you're a brand new employee, you just graduated San Diego, and now you're a Target. Can you even imagine starting a job out of college fully remote?
I guess I can, because I've seen a lot of people do it. But for me, Target's an interesting place. I bet Target's one of those places where they're back in the office because, again, 100%. Back to their manual and because of even, so yes, of course, there's the sort of central business and marketing functions, but the vast majority of Target employees actually work in a store. So I would assume they probably the execs probably are in office. I think it would be a totally different experience. I think that you lose that social element and you lose that, I mentioned people from my start class, you lose that connection to some of those people who are going through it with you.
I was just about to say, but what about also like all those things you learn as a young employee by observing senior folks like yourself, how you conduct yourself in meetings, body language, cadence, how you interact as a leader, how, I can't even imagine being in a place where I am now if I didn't have those early experiences, like grinding my way through an office and being in those meetings and taking the notes and just being a fly on the wall, that now I think a lot of these younger employees are missing out on.
I think you're right. But with that said, they're also to an extent, I think they're also it's a different work environment now. And, it means you can be more casual, but it also means that you have way more Zoom fatigue. Like people sit on their computers on, calls like this, like 10 hours a day. And that really wears on people as well. We do have people who like to manifest as their avatars at Vayner 3, and that's cool too. So it's a whole new working environment. And I think it's not for me to judge what's right or wrong, but I think if I joined Target in 2011, and started fully remote, I would have had a very different working experience there.
So you, as the leader of Vayner 3, what has been your biggest challenge in building, growing, and maintaining culture on this team over the last couple of years?
The biggest challenge is ensuring that we're able to balance the quality of work with the speed at which Web3 is moving. We might have an amazing idea 2 months ago, but by the time it launches, the market's totally shifted. That's like, that idea is dead. There's the speed that matters so much in Web3, and you want to balance that with the culture and not burning people out. So I think that's our biggest challenge is Web3 moves really quickly, and you want to have the right work-life balance for your team while being super innovative, which requires that always on type of monitoring and having a pulse on the market.
So I heard in a previous interview that your first 6 months, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if I misheard this, but your first 6 months at Vayner were a little bit difficult, not necessarily in a bad way, but just adjusting to that entrepreneurial nature of the company and the speed. And I know when I was at Vayner, it's been like 8 years, but it was very similar, is the fact like, hey, this is different. This is not what I'm used to. I'm used to coming from a much more structured. I'm sure you heard stories back in the day where we would come in and there'd be no seats left and we have to sit on the floor. That's how quickly it was growing. But how did you handle, adjust, and react to that inside to make sure it didn't manifest in a negative energy outside?
I had a huge learning curve when I first joined VaynerMedia, no doubt about it. Going platform side and brand side to agency side is not a typical direction. Usually you see people go agency side to company side, and then we've had so many people do that and they're like, wow, I'm chilling. Like, this is great. Like, I've got like 5 hours per day extra. So it's not a common direction, but I wanted to do that because I wanted to challenge myself. And, Gary told me if you work for me for 2 years, you're going to learn more than you will 10 years at Google. And who knows if that's exactly true, but it was very thought-provoking. And I learned so much in the first 2 years at Vayner that have really unlocked opportunities for me that would have never been possible working in a huge company like that. Even doing interviews like this, requires like 7 levels of clearance, which is not the fun thing to do. So
we get through them.
Exactly.
It's worth it. Yeah.
You get through them, but it's like, you've got to have a bunch of these type of things, which of course they need to do as a big company. So my first 6 months were a big learning curve. I had a lot of late nights, a lot of just figuring out how to do things that, at Vayner, we're very self-sufficient. And that means whether it's building a website or making a sizzle reel or, doing a recruitment fair or doing a Web3 demo day, we just do it ourselves a lot of the time. And, that's a kind of a contrast to Google, where there's specialists within the company who do every little part of what needs to happen. And it's one of the things that I love about working at Vayner is that we're so self-reliant.
And I was literally about to say that. And I was going through the editing. I was telling you before, we just completed the coverage for VeeCon. And one of the pieces of it, I have Jen Stiles, who you know well
Adore Jen.
Jen is amazing. Just texting with her before. And I recorded a segment at a dinner that we were having, and she talked about everyone at the table that we're all self-starters. We're all creators and builders. And I think that's really the common trait in the Web3 world. And I think that's one of the common traits at Vayner too, is really that entrepreneurial spirit. It's like, hey, let's figure it out and let's get it done and not always have to outsource. Let's look inside first. And I think that's a huge component of Web3. So let's talk about Web3 for a moment here, not just specifically NFTs, but we talk about which is all inclusive in Web3, whether it be, crypto, blockchain, and all the other pieces. What's like really exciting you about this space so much that you have really dedicated your professional career to it?
A couple of things that have really inspired me to dedicate like my entire professional focus to it. One is One is the creator opportunities. I think for the first time ever as a creator, you are really incentivized to build in this new ecosystem. You can, one, have aligned incentives with your community. Two, you get the vast majority of the sort of like proceeds from both an initial mint and secondary. The secondary element is just so huge for even emerging creators who they're small now, but who knows, in 10 years, they might be huge. And having this ability to actually continuously develop a revenue stream from their early work is incredible. So one is the creator opportunities. Two is the fact that I believe that this is the next generation of communication between brands and their consumers or their communities. I think in Web 2, I saw this at Google where like you're basically just paying a toll, even like searching your brand terms. Brands have to pay for that. They have to do it because if they don't, it's like somebody else is going to bid it and buy it. So you're basically literally paying whenever someone searches your own brand to have them directed to your page. We see the same thing from Instagram and Facebook where, you know, if you want to reach your own fans and followers, you have to pay because everything's a pay to play model now. That those days of organic are kind of gone. And I think that basically means brands are renting their own audiences from these platforms. And I believe that this new paradigm that's unlocked by Web3 is going to enable a far more transparent and mutually beneficial relationship between brands and fans who actually want to follow them and engage with what they're building.
I love that take. So sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Yeah, and I think the third reason I'm really interested in Web3 is that I think that it's just so clear that consumers are spending so much of their time online. It makes complete sense that they will start to own items digitally and express themselves digitally in an interoperable fashion. Like I know I can talk about myself and I know I'm on my computer 12 hours a day. And the fact that I don't have a digital identity that I can bring with me across different ecosystems is such a gap that I think, will become clear to others in the coming years. It's just, I see it very clearly that this is the next iteration of how consumers are going to express themselves digitally.
That's a fantastic take on that, and I certainly appreciate it. And I didn't mean to interrupt you before because my brain immediately went to this thought of playing nice in the sandbox. I mean, pun intended here, where you have brands, and I think I'm going to go on my soapbox for a minute here. I don't think we talk enough about Web 2.5, that it doesn't always have to go full Web 3. And I think a lot of the brands right now are transitioning from figuring out the Web 2 to the Web 3. And I think there's a place for Web 2.5 for us to pause and say, what's this middle ground? How are we ensuring that we're transitioning not only the customer experience, but also internally and making sure that we're not jumping ahead too quickly? How do you, because there's a huge consultancy component to Vayner 3, how do you work with these Web 2 companies, these historically, tenured organizations to play nice in the sandbox with these new wave of creators? Some of them might even be docs. They may be one name folks that you don't even know who the heck they are, and all you're looking at is a profile picture. How do you kind of work with your clients, especially ones that are seasoned corporate executives, to dip their toes in the water and play nice in the sandbox?
I think by creating programs that are mutually beneficial between the creator and the brands. The creators want to gain more mainstream notoriety, more mainstream awareness, and the brands want Web3 relevance. So if we can build those partnerships that are a win-win for both parties, then everybody wins. And we're still at these very early days where like 1 + 1 can equal 11 if it's the right partnership. If it's Doodles and Bear Paint, if it's Johnny Walker and Gift Goat, if it's, Nouns and Bud Light. Like there are just so many of these that I think have really landed and really resonated in a way that's mutually beneficial for both parties. And by the way, it doesn't need to be a purely like commercial transaction. I think that we've done some that are very like paid sponsorship and some that it's an in-kind type of situation that can really add value to both sides of the organization. And at Vayner 3, oftentimes we're more behind the curtain, right? It's not like it's not coming from us, right? It's coming from either a brand or an NFT program, and we're the matchmakers. And that's a really fun place for us to be.
And that's a beauty of Web3. It's just been so open and connecting. I think we saw that at, if we go back to VeeCon, and I think about my experience, and I was very privileged and lucky to have media credentials and be behind the scenes and see all of these brands interacting. And when I say brands, these are people. These are people that you and I know very well, people that I've just met for the first time. And everybody was so open and connecting and this mindfulness of abundance. I mean, what excites you the most about this community of people?
I love that. Yeah, I love the abundant mindset. I love that everybody's here to build and that people are, it's really like all tides are, the boat is the tide is lifting all of the boats right now, which
Collaborate
is
over compete.
amazing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's very collaborate over compete, even with other agencies and consultancies. Like I send them leads. Like I want everybody to get into the space of Web3 because that makes my job easier
Lifts everybody.
versus harder. So it's not a competitive place. I don't think this like golden era of like collaboration will last forever inherently. Like space is mature, people get into pricing wars and all that, but we're still like years away from that happening.
Hopefully.
And it's so nice to like, really build with people who everyone wants to win. And, the Web3 community, I think, is something really special. I've made like genuinely great friends. Last night I had dinner with Keith Grossman, who I literally just met through
Time
NFTs.
Magazine.
And yeah, he's an amazing like leader and figure in the space. And we were talking about NFTs and he said he was in Miami and I was like, let's get together. And we got together for dinner. And, I've made some like genuine real friendships through the NFT ecosystem. And I think that's just unusual for a hobby and profession to take on such a big percentage of your time and energy. But as you know, Adam, like NFTs really suck you in, and like so many of us are so passionate about this, where we really want to dedicate our time in and outside of work to advancing the space.
I mean, amen to that. I mean, it's so funny too. Our other mutual friend, my good friend Chris Adamo, at the end of VeeCon, we were sitting late Saturday night. We were sitting up in one of the end zones, and he says to me, he goes, "It feels like summer camp. It feels like VeeFriend summer camp. Everyone is, happy to see each other. We're all playing and having a good time. And it's like, see you next summer. It's like, it's a real community there." So I want to close out the conversation on NFTs before I bring it home here and wrap up the show. What do you think, Avery, is the number one threat against growing and preserving a healthy, NFT ecosystem?
Over commercialization and over focus on the financial aspects of NFTs. I think what has happened over the last 18 months is there's been a tremendous rise in both ETH price and NFT prices. And a lot of people are new to crypto, so they haven't been through one of these cycles before. So it creates a lot of like anxiety and fear and FUD. The people who've been through a couple of these are just like, okay, well, let's build because, the next cycle will be coming. It's hard to predict. Nobody has a crystal ball, so we can't tell you when, but this will be back. It will be better. It will be bigger. And I think an over focus on commercialization is very detrimental to both NFT brands and projects, and to bring in more mainstream folks, because that's the reason we see so many headlines being super negative, because the positive headlines were all about X is selling for millions of dollars and X is worth $1 billion. So with that over focus on financialization, you get the positive headlines, but then you get the negative headlines as well. And I hope in the next season of crypto and Web3, we're able to think about Web3 beyond just the immediate financial gains.
Yeah, that's a fantastic take on it. So leave us with one top secret piece of alpha. What projects, what NFT projects are kind of exciting you right now that maybe, if you're a casual collector, maybe you should look into and check out?
Great question.
Put you on the spot there.
I think we're going to continue to see open editions and free mints be the projects of people who are building right now. I think those who are smart and strategic are understanding the current market conditions make it very hard to sell out a fixed number and very hard to sell out at a high price point. But actually, it's not even altruistic. If you design a cool program and you sell it for free, you'll make more money on the secondary. So I think that there's an opportunity in both free mints with a real art, with a real team, and open editions. I think the Women in Weapons team just did an open edition mint, and I thought it was so smart as a way to not create FUD and also let the market decide the quantity. It's something that we've seen with some top artists with very small periods of time, like 10 minutes, whatever. But I think we'll start to see open editions do really well.
That's some really good ones. So let's bring it home here, Avery. What is the single greatest piece of advice you've ever received that you take action on every day?
One thing that I just was reading about was Danny Meyer's excellence reflex. Someone on my team told me about this, and I spent the weekend reading up on it. The excellence reflex is something that you can't even necessarily train, but when you see a piece of trash on the ground, you pick it up. You see, somebody who has spinach in their teeth, you tell them something to the side. You see something, a typo in a deck, you fix it. I think that the excellence reflex is something that I try to bring to every part of my life. Just that excellence reflex. And it's something that I try to inspire in my team and friends as well, is just always being the bigger person, always just trying to keep it excellent.
I love it. And that's such an important take. Just as Gary says it all the time, doing the right thing every time is the right thing. And last but not least, Avery, you look back on your life and your career, and there's been challenges. There's been peaks and valleys. And when you think about those valleys and challenging times, you've had to look deep down inside, and you've had to harness your own inner tenacity to pull you up and pull you forward through those tough times. And on the opposite side of that, where you sit now, you are leading an incredibly innovative organization at the forefront of everything awesome, technologically sound, everything going in the right direction, and you want to show gratitude. Avery, what is your compass in life? What is your North Star?
I try to leave every day a little bit better than how I started it. Always try to give more than I take. I think over the past, in my career, I've had the opportunity to do things that were incredible. Very special opportunities, but were also really challenging and really challenged me and pushed me into places I didn't think were possible. But always just trying to leave things a little bit better than I found them. Try to help somebody out. It's been amazing to see how, my role at Vayner has allowed me to change so many lives of people who joined us and have gone on to do amazing things, gone on to help us in big ways and really change their lives. So that's something that I take a lot of pride in, and also I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that.
Awesome. Avery, I want to thank you so much for not just your time today, and I said it earlier, but just your generosity as far as knowledge and always giving and always connecting and always doing the right thing. I want to thank you so much. Where could folks find you? Where could they connect with you? Where could they learn more?
For sure. Vayner3.com, excuse me, let's do this again. Vayner3.com is our website. You can also find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the places. And for me personally, I am Avery_Akkineni on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever you need to find me. And thank you so much for having me, Adam. It's been really fun to hang out with you.
Absolutely. Likewise. And I will catch you at the next event soon, either in Miami or Minneapolis or wherever the world takes us. Hang with us for one moment here as we sign off. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please follow Avery. She is incredible. Get the real alpha. Check out Vayner 3. You know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on all the socials. Remember, look out for one another. Take care of each other and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.